Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll distribute podcasts for you so it can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Here we are, podcast number 4. I'm Kimberly Dietrich, and this is Quirky Questions Answered, and my co-host today is Brian Reddick.
Hello there.
He is a personal trainer. If you've not heard his podcast, and Shasta's here too. She just shook herself. Brian is in podcast episode 2, so please check it out. We're excited to have on our show today Susan Carroll Davis. She's the founder and president of Curious Dog Creative, which is a consulting service for film production, acting performance, and development of clients' dream projects. She's a director, producer, actress, and an arts educator. Susan is a member of Actors Equity Association, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, Women in Film, Dallas president, and founder of Artists Enclave of Denton County, which I am a treasurer of, this great, fun, nonprofit group. She has been in a number of movies, theatrical productions, and TV shows. Welcome to the show, Susan. Let's begin by telling us about yourself and the shows you've been a part of, either directing, producing, or acting in.
Who are you talking about? Are you sure it's me? No. I guess I'll go backwards and say the most recent thing, which is the film Mac-Minded, Humanly Possible, about a TW professor, Dr. Pauline Beery Mac, back in the space race years of the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
She was just a remarkable human being. She was a woman in a men's world, and she obtained grants from NASA to do bed rest studies and determine what happens to our bones in space travel, which is quite significant.
Wow.
There's a 10 times greater loss of bone in space than women's menopause. So that gives you some idea. It's a heck of a lot. And that film has been really doing well. We've been in festivals in all over Texas, Florida. We're going to be up in Wisconsin. And we have some other news which we cannot announce yet about a super finalist in major international competition. But let's just say it's a story that came out of Denton that came at the right time, because this is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 launch.
Yes.
And I've discovered that if you're telling a story at the right time, it certainly is more likely to be listened to and watched than if it's out there in the hinterland somewhere. So, but that is kind of reflective of my interest in telling stories that come out of my roots. I look at, people I've known in my life, such as Weldon Burgoon and his family had a wonderful Western wear store. When that store was closing, I wanted to tell the story of his life here through many different, evolutions of what being in business, retail business means when the internet is a part of it too.
Nice.
One about Joe Williams, who is magnificent watercolor artist and also a graduate of the University of North Texas and a teacher.
Mean Green.
Yeah, Mean Green, where she met her husband, Mean Green. And that was just kind of looking at what she did, but why she did it, that she loves to, what's her way of saying it? Paint what you see, not what you think you see.
Oh, wow.
That really, sometimes our mind and the way we interpret things gets a little twisted from what is actually right in front of us. So that kind of applies to a lot in life, doesn't it?
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
say that again, please. I like that.
Okay. Paint what you see, not what you think you see.
Wow. I like that.
Yes, paint what you see, not what you think you see. Then what about, of all things, the landfills in Indonesia? That was a film called Retno's Refusal. And it was a woman from Indonesia that works with garbage dumps and providing education for the children whose families live in those garbage dumps and make their living from trash. But she came here to the United States and wanted to go out to the Denton landfill and see how things were different in the way we handled it. So all of those really came about by someone saying, have you heard about, or running into someone and them saying, gosh, I'd love to tell a story about. So I pay attention to what people are talking about that they think is worthy of time and interest in the story.
People like to tell their story.
Yes, they do.
So.
Speaking of stories, I would love this story, and I know I'll probably get flack for it, but of course, I love Joe Green. Trust me, I love Joe Green.
Yes.
But I've always said that if it wasn't for Abner Haynes, there'll be no Joe Green. Abner was the first African American to play for UNT.
Yes,
so
yes.
I wish people would do a story about him, and there are so many stories that I've heard and he's told, and I'm like, I wish they could capture that.
Have you ever seen When We Were All Broncos?
Yes.
Okay, that's a start.
Yes, it's
in
definitely a
telling
start.
that story.
It's a start,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much more about how the team had to, of course, he couldn't stay in certain hotels.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of deep stories, and I wish they would do a story about him.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I love Joe, but again, if it wasn't for Abner, there'll be no Joe.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I would encourage anybody listening to this that if you're thinking of wanting to see something made that's important to you, start putting aside some money so that when someone comes along that can tell that story for you, that you will be able to support them in getting that story made. For a long time in my work as a filmmaker, I did it without pay or without really paying anyone except, oh, isn't it great that we're doing this together? But 2 years ago, I just determined that it was too important to think of filmmaking and all the parts of it as a career and a valid form of work to not compensate anyone who worked with me,
Right.
or myself. It's easy to kind of budget yourself out of a budget just because you know there are other ways the money needs to get spent. But set aside a Renaissance fund in your life so that whatever kind of artist or person comes along that can help you tell your story, that you can say, let me give you this as a start.
That's good.
Because you remember during the Renaissance, they used to talk about Renaissance princes, and I'm sure there were princesses too, that would support an artist in court or favored their development as a musician or an artist. Now, granted, there were probably a whole lot more artists that didn't have a Renaissance prince.
Right.
But that idea of valuing art and music as valid a part of culture as any other thing that we have is something we need to really hold on to in this country before there isn't any to
yes, please
provide to our children and those that follow them.
Yes, very true. All right, ready for questions?
Oh yes, I'm always short on words.
Now,
Short on words.
Okay.
Now, I have one for you for sure. Have you ever dated a football player in California, like a Joe Montana, Jerry Rice type ball player? You know.
Oh no.
Come on now. Come on.
No, I in California dated actors who might have played athletes
Okay.
in film or television, but I've
Okay.
not ever dated an actual football player.
So, any names who have played these type films as they want to be athletes?
Oh, well, Todd Truly. Oh, I really shouldn't say anything. but I can think of some actor. I didn't date him, but I think of him playing roles as like Ty Cobb, for instance, on stage. I didn't. We were very good friends, and I saw him play that role, and he was already athletic himself.
Okay. Nice.
So no, I haven't. I've dated musicians.
Ah.
Yes, because I lived in Nashville, and so there are just a fair number of them there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I have a great appreciation for how hard musicians work at their craft to getting together and just jamming and that type of thing. I don't see actors on their off days getting together and reading lines.
That's true.
Or I just think musicians find a place
they do
to do what they love to do in anywhere and everywhere, and athletes too. I'm sure they put their football in the back of their
track.
I've done a mixture of both, and I'll tell you, I laugh at my friends because it's like they have $1,000 more worth of stuff.
Yes.
1,000 more just guitars and stuff, and then they play at a gig for like $80.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, so you split between 5 of y'all? I'm like, good gosh. Yeah. So, and then of course they drive forever. So yeah, it's definitely humbling.
Yes, it is. But if you don't do it, you do lose it.
Yes, you do.
I think just with exercising your voice, exercising your.
That is so true. So true.
Your talent in anything.
That's true. Yeah. All right. So, have you ever found actors or actresses in weird places for your films or in your producing theatrical productions? Anything? Any weird places?
Oh, that is a great question. Let me see. I did a short film called The Importance of Blind Dating. And it was kind of a spoof on the importance of being earnest by Oscar Wilde. And our casting for that began with a pool of friends that I knew immediately. But over the course of time, developing the script and getting the money together for it, people drop away because other things come along.
Right.
And maybe a person you would not have thought would have any interest or time, or perhaps you don't even think they have the talent to do it. That person steps into your life and you give them an opportunity and they blow your socks off because they were more right for it than the original person that you had cast to do
Very
it.
Neat. Okay.
And I am working on a script about a historical figure in Texas state politics who was a vaudeville performer. Love to get this story made, and I frequently will run into people and say to them, please send me your contact information, keep up with me, or I'll keep up with you, because when we do decide to do this, we're going to need a lot of people. It's a period piece. It's set back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Brian's wanting your contact information.
Yeah. So, there's certain people that just seem to look like they would, like Brian. I'm sure we could find a role for you.
Really? Quite.
Yeah. So yes, I'm constantly thinking like a casting director, even though if we get this project off the ground, I'll probably be producing it and be able to make suggestions to whoever would be directing it. Like, let me give you this list of people, call them in to read, and we'll go from there.
Good deal.
keep us in mind.
Yes, and by all means. But I have not cast many things
Okay.
where I would be going out and looking for people in unusual places. I am directing my first collegiate production at Texas Women's University, and we are casting that in the first week of November. And I'm very excited about that because I hope I'll bring to it a sensitivity to what it's like to walk into a room with people you've never met before and
Right.
put them at ease enough that they will let you see who they, truly are and what they bring to the table. It's very intimidating to walk into a room and have people sit behind a table and stare at you as you are holding on to a piece of paper that's shaking. When I lived in California, you'd walk into a room for a television episode, a casting situation, and you might have anywhere from 7 to 10 people behind the camera that's recording it, but also their producers or showrunners or director. And you have prepared material, but you just feel like there's so much at stake that it's sometimes hard to stick with those choices you were certain about before you walked in the room. It seemed, oh yes, I know I'm going to do it this way. And you walk in and you see 10 or 12 people.
Yeah.
And suddenly, you can sometimes doubt your choices.
Yeah.
And pick some way out choice that comes into your mind at the moment because you're a tad nervous.
Yeah.
And I do think that in situations as an artist, when you're really literally hungry because you need the work to pay your bills, that you carry a certain kind of a little bit of desperation in the way you present yourself. You can be overly friendly or overly trying too hard. So I think some of the best advice someone gave me was just take this as one more opportunity, no more important than the one the day before. It's just part of the process, and don't give it any more weight than the one that was the day before. If you're auditioning for an Academy Award winning director, of course it seems there is more at stake financially and how your career is going to develop. But if you walk into the room with that weight on your shoulders, it's like having, a monkey on your back. You can't really move and be and
yeah. I'm sure it's easier said than done too.
I think one of the directors who put me most at ease was Cameron Crowe, who did the wonderful film Almost Famous. I don't know if you remember that, but it was about a group of musicians on the road. Classic. And he, when you walked in, shook your hand. It was in his office with the casting director, and he just had a warmth that exuded from him. He, like, you really got the sense that he wanted you to do the best you could do, whether or not he cast you in the role.
Yeah. Very nice.
And in Memphis, I recall auditioning for a Francis Coppola movie. It was one of the John Grisham books. And it was at the Pyramid, that complex. Is it sports primarily, the Pyramid? And I had on really, really tall heels. And I had to walk into a room with a casting director who'd worked with Francis Coppola. And it was a big deal. And I had to walk what seemed like a mile across this really, really thick red carpet. Oh. And, your heels are sinking into the carpet. And I was pretty sure I was going to. Yeah. But that from opening door to where you had to be close enough to them can seem like a football field in terms of length. At that same not at that same audition, but when I got called back for it, I did a read in a room that was much smaller. And I didn't do the read that I felt like I could have done. So I had driven from Nashville to Memphis, which is a little over 3 hours. And I put a lot into being there. So I got to the front door and I turned around and went back and I said, I'd really like to do that again. And that's not something you usually ask because they're busy, and also because what if you don't do it as well?
Right.
Yes.
But I did go in and I did it again. I didn't get cast, but what was interesting was the person who was casting it is someone I became good friends with when I moved to California, and she remembered that I had taken that leap of faith.
Nice.
Wow.
And she ended up, in addition to casting some of his films, also was a poet and a performer. So I didn't know that she knew in her heart what I was having to go through to do that.
Right.
So I think if you're sincere in making a request like that, you're not trying to take advantage of the situation. And I think people can read that, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Exactly. Okay, cool. All right, your turn. What's your question?
Get ready.
Now, what was your craziest reviews that someone has given you? Like, maybe she was like, let's just say she was okay, but the part wasn't for her kind of thing, or
Oh,
maybe,
yes. All
those
right.
kind of reviews.
All right. I will tell you that. I one of my first television roles on camera was for the season finale of NYPD Blue.
Oh, okay.
Which is no longer on, but it was a wonderful,
Nice.
show. Great people attached to it. And I was cast as a woman of the streets.
Ooh.
Yes. So yes,
Shame on
yes,
you.
I was.
Shame on you,
and
Susan.
no skin here. Okay, no skin, but I was in a role, shall we say? And I had to call my parents, and since they were always a little doubtful about me being out there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
When you get work, you certainly want to be able to say, I just got booked. So they knew the show. They watched the show. They thought it was a great show. And I started out with who I was going to be in the scene with, like Dennis Franz, and it's going to be great. And I'm playing a prostitute as fast as I could say it. And this is what my mother told people at my church. This was around Easter, okay?
Oh,
she
Lord.
said, Mary Magdalene was a prostitute too.
Your mother say that?
And if Mary Magdalene from the scriptures,
Right.
who was a prostitute and who was reached out to by Jesus, but this is what she told folks, and that look at the role that she played in Jesus' life. So I don't know what she and my dad really thought,
Right?
but that was a way they could get through me playing that one little important scene in the finale. I'm just anyway. So that's one.
That's a good one. I like it.
I have been in student films when I was just getting started, where I had to play a zombie. Yes, never really got into that, but I just don't know how folks do a horror film with all the things that you are supposed to have to look like or eat or
right.
Yeah. So that was an odd one. I've played a lot of different kinds of animals in plays. I've been wolf. I've been a lizard.
Oh wow, that's different.
Okay.
I've been. Well, yes, my name was Chameleon. I was also the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz, which was just a lot of fun.
Oh.
And so I And when I'm reviewed on stage, I'm often described as moving like a cat, kind of
okay.
So I'm a Leo, but I don't own cats, but I observe them, and I think they do move very fluidly.
She
So
has cat-like reflexes.
yes. Did that help?
Yes, it
Yes,
did.
that was
So
good.
sweet.
I've been everything from a nun
Hmm.
to other than a nun.
Let's see.
That's true.
Nun
Prostitute
and-
to men.
Yes.
Amen.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Okay. What difficulties have you had to overcome in the film industry? Or is there any?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well,
it may not be.
I think proximity, like living here right now, the bigger projects are not happening in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
True. They're not.
They're in New Orleans, or they're in New Mexico, or they're in Memphis, Tennessee, with this new Bluff City law, or some in Austin. But when you're not really in front of a casting person or really have an agent that's like throwing people right out into auditions in those places, it's especially tough. So the tough part is people say, oh, you have to be in the market to be in the market. At a certain point in your career, you certainly do. I think, a wonderful career like Kevin Costner's, he can live wherever he wants to, and people know who he is. They know what they're going to have when they have that person walk on their set. They're going to have a professional. But when you're unknown to people because you're outside of Hollywood, all of a sudden you're not in Hollywood. So even though you've lived there, they don't know exactly who you are. They don't know what they're getting when you come in the door. They can look at your resume, and that helps.
Right.
But they can't pick up the phone and call someone in Los Angeles who has just worked with you as readily as they could if you were living on the West Coast or living in the East Coast. I don't want to make excuses. That's just something I'm cognizant of. And now I'm freer to drive long distances to go to an audition, because if you get a call to go to Austin, you might get it at 6 p.m. to be there the next morning. I used to do that quite a bit when I lived in Nashville. I would drive all night to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, or Cleveland, or wherever, Atlanta. I can do that easier now because I'm on my own.
Right.
But that, I don't know if people realize that it's that quick kind of turnaround that
I didn't realize that.
Oh, yes. I mean, sometimes a couple of days in advance, but it's really rare that you get much lead time on it.
Okay.
So the difficulty, a little bit of proximity, and just, I think there are a lot of stories that I would love to have a chance to read for. I think you have to do your homework and find those stories. And right now I haven't been investing the time. You have to invest. You have to work hard to get the work. You can't expect someone else to get it for you.
It's funny you said like the quick turnaround. It's almost like an athlete. Let's say for college, let's say you prepare for this quarterback all week long. Then all of a sudden, let's just say the game is on a Saturday, but he has this freak accident on Friday. So you've been preparing for him. You're like, wait a minute, the backup is coming in. Oh.
Yes.
Is there any film on him? Nope. What do we do? Just play it out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, And people can learn so much about you so much easier now than in the past. I'm redoing my website that should have been worked on and redone about a year ago because it doesn't reflect what's truly going on. And I think you can lose opportunities by not taking advantage of what is available to you. I mean, there's so much with social media and so much with internet that can work to your advantage if you will just realize that it's as important as it is.
Right, exactly.
So, and I'm a big believer in writing notes to people when you've auditioned for them. That's kind of become an old thing that people don't do so much anymore, but I believe it's important.
People don't write period.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Oh, a letter. What's that?
Right?
Yeah.
How do you address the envelope? Or what's cursive?
You know what? Language too. When I did the play Iron here through Artist Enclave, it was the first time I had spoken with women's prison language, which was pretty strong. It was strong. It was also culturally a more fitting language in some ways. But things that are still hard for me to say, I don't like taking the Lord's name in vain. I don't like saying just awful things to another person. Sometimes you're playing a character, though.
Did you have to do that?
For which it is exactly who that person is. And if you don't say it in the way it's written, you're really not going to get the impact that writer wants your character to have on another person. I love to be able to read a whole script, and that's rare. That's really rare that you get to. When I first moved to Los Angeles, 19 years ago, you would get the whole script like the night before you went on set. But because there's so much sharing of information about episodes through sources that should not be sharing it, you do not get that whole script put on your doorstep the night before.
You just segue into one of our questions.
Yeah. And what is that?
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. I would say that a person such as Mr. Costner would get that whole script, but they would not. They would know in giving it to him that it was not going to be used in the wrong way. So
what would you look for in a script? I guess substance or flash or shock value kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put this out here to whoever knows Mr. Costner. I believe that what I'm looking for is just a really well-written script where you have relationships and moments in the writing that allow for two people to actually have a decent conversation. Talking about Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
I just think that there needs to be a flashback to John Dutton's mother when he was a child, and that I would just be perfect for that.
The dad, I was crying. I was like, oh my God.
No, but I've kind of forgotten what the question was.
What do you look for in a script?
Oh, what do you look for in a script? A well-written script. A script that it can be absurdist. I mean, it can have language where you can't tell at first where it's going. Maybe they're half sentences or they're really long monologues. But if it's going somewhere and it's taking the audience on a journey that's worthwhile, is it entertaining? I do think I'd like something to be entertaining. And entertaining can mean a lot of different things to different people. But I watch a lot of documentaries for artists for Thin Line Fest. And it can be the most worthwhile topic in the world.
Yes.
About, let's say, environmental causes. And I really, really want more support for that. But you could have 3 films, and one film really stands out in terms of getting the message across of how important caring for the world is. But they do it in such a way that is, it pulls you in heart, mind, and soul. It just takes you all in.
Yeah.
That's an art. That's an art. Information is not enough for me. And I look for who's written it, like look at what have they done in the past and what's happened to what they did in the past. Are they really going to do with the material what they say they're going to do with it? Because I know you can invest a lot of time on a project and they say it's going to go into distribution, but it really doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, wow.
So I think, the track record of who is working on a project colors the way the script will appear to me. Like if it's a lot of movies that just end up in, I call kind of a B movie, like not a really strong story, not a really strong production value. You can kind of see a pattern in some instances of groups of people that will kind of make that same sort of level of film, and all power to them because they're making a living and they're providing work to people. But I guess I would still say this. When I picked a project, I would want my parents or my grandparents or anybody in my legacy or my church, my God, to be glad that I did it.
There you go. That's good.
Because they may not exactly agree with the outcome of the story. They might think, well, I wish it had been told this way, but they are not embarrassed or worried or offended by my having done what I did, because I just think that's a respect.
Yeah.
A respect.
Yeah. I wonder about some of the actors and actresses that do things and wonder what their parents are thinking.
Well, and that's the thing.
I'd hurt my son.
I get. Everybody's got their own journey, and
Yes,
I can't
they
tell
do.
anybody
Yeah.
what to do, but
Definitely.
I think you have to live with yourself all your entire life.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have one for you that you might enjoy and love.
Oh dear.
Let's just say if you had a Susan Productions. What would you change about the industry if you had like your own little production type, movie thing,
Yes.
there going on?
Well, I do with Curious Dog Created, because
See, there you go.
It is not. It has been documentaries up to this point, but this project about Harley Sadler, who was a very fine Texas statesman and a vaudeville performer. I think that I would just want to be sure that if I told people it was going to get done, that it got done.
Oh.
I'd like to give myself a deadline. If I say it's going to be finished in 2021, it needs to be finished in 2021. I need to somehow organize my life and figure out how to have the money straight all the way through. It's very important to me that you keep your word.
That's
keep
good.
your word to whoever you're promising to get this project done for, and the people who are involved in it. If you're involved in a project and you're excited about it and you think, oh goody, I'm going to be involved in this project that's going to be in film festivals, but it never sees the light of day. It's discouraging.
Yeah.
So I like to make sure things get done in a timely way, and where every single person is compensated the way they thought they were going to get compensated.
That's a good point too.
Yes.
Well, I don't need much.
Just
Every
recognition,
single person.
respect.
That's what I just
I'll
want.
be happy to be any film you have.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
boy.
just so important. We all, that thing of like, oh, it's only $25. Hey, you know what? That $25
yeah.
fills up part of your gas tank.
Exactly.
And it's the self-worth of, I have done something and I have been valued enough to receive a compensation for it. So
And it's good for the resume as well.
Exactly.
yes, it does. It does build that resume. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we want to know, Susan, a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in aliens? With Brian, do the little.
I think it's every bit possible. I do. No, I do. I think that, especially this work on this documentary about NASA and learning about different life forms and watching a fair amount of science fiction myself, I don't think we can rule out the possibility of it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, who's to say we don't look like an alien to an alien?
Right.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. I've met quite a few people here lately who have had alien encounters.
Okay, have I?
So that's been interesting. I had no clue. Some of my friends even have had them. So,
well,
they were too embarrassed to talk about it, really.
I don't think I have. But I mean, I've had what I would call like ghost-like experiences in homes.
Yeah.
So if that can be so, I don't see why the other cannot be so.
Me too. All
Mhm.
right. All right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, have you had any of your nightmares come true?
Nightmares come true. Oh boy, I hope not. Let me think. Nightmare. Can you define a nightmare?
Let's just say, let's say you were dreaming about some young fellow. That you met along the way.
Yeah.
And let's just say y'all were supposed to get together for coffee and tea or whatever.
All right.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
All right.
You had a dream that he was driving to come see you in his nice Corvette.
Yes.
And he was a football player?
Oh, yeah. And let's just say
wearing a Dallas Cowboy jersey.
Yeah, there you go. That he doesn't
Dallas
like.
Cowboys,
yeah, he's
sorry.
That'd be a nightmare for him.
But anyway, let's just say he was driving and all of a sudden on 35 was a wreck that happens.
Yes.
And all of a sudden he's in the hospital.
All right.
So is any of these kind of dreams come true?
Okay. Like premonition type.
Ooh,
like,
yeah.
Okay, that's a good
Nice.
one. Well, I can't say that. Well, okay. I played Nurse Ratched in a production of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie.
Yeah.
I love that
So
movie.
I had a dream the week before we opened, actually 2 days before we opened, that the cast was trying to do me in.
Oh my.
Yes, they were trying to do me in, and that they had kidnapped me the first opening night and whisked me away, and that was the last anyone ever heard of me. So we were sitting on the stage getting notes the night before we opened, and this massive stage light, huge, heavy stage light, fell right in front of me. If I had been sitting under it, it would have done some significant damage. That was kind of freaky. Also, when I played that role, people would yell out from the audience, "Kill her." instead
She's
of
a crazy
instead of
character.
the patients, it was like kill her. And even though you're playing a character, when you hear that, this is a strange world we live in terms of people personifying things. And I don't think then there was any danger someone was going to hurt me because they saw me
Right.
playing that character.
But still,
But if it were to happen now, I might have a little more concern because there can be some obsession people have about things. I have had dreams about futuristic things that may or may not happen, but if they did, I would go, oh, where I was a prisoner along with a lot of other people in a desert type environment, and there were guards all around us dressed a certain historically Nazi type way in dark clothes and all of that. And that I began singing along with some other people because they were saying, we were being told to be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. And I started singing with some other people. And as we rose to sing, the figures kind of shrunk, sort of like the Wicked Witch of the West. And that was many, many years ago, but that dream has actually stayed with me, I think, because it gives me a hope that if that were ever to happen in the world in which we live, which it seems it could, just a prejudice of one people against another,
Right.
that I hope I would think of that dream and go, now just get up and have courage and take the chance to stand for what you believe. So that's the kind of dream I've had that's been encouraging and one that was scary.
Yeah.
It's funny how you say that. I guess when the audience says "kill her,"
Mm-hmm.
you know that they didn't react on that, but you were like, okay, please don't kill me. It's like back in I want to say like wrestling. I'm using wrestling as an example.
Mm-hmm.
In the 70s, the 60s kind of era, maybe early 80s, before people knew that it was fake.
Yeah.
Even though some knew it was fake, but you had these group of fans that thought it was real.
Yes.
And there's been documents and, of course, books about how fans would attack the bad guys after they leave. Like,
oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people being stabbed and stuff like that. And it's kind of crazy that I'm like, okay, well, yeah.
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 Yeah. The arts.
Yes.
Our sports.
Yes.
Take people's
Yes.
emotions.
And they get emotional and they see it as real when they're playing
Sure.
when they're playing a character in front of you.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I've met a couple of wrestlers, back in the world class days, and they would say, yeah, man, they said there were times when we needed more security because you had like grandmas or moms that have like switchblades and ready to stab you.
Oh, boy. Boy. Well, I guess sometimes you're in a career that has more hazard or danger implied in what you're doing. And hopefully I'm not involved in that right now.
And like you said, I mean, of course, the arts are emotions. Like,
yes.
Even when me and her would watch a movie,
yes.
TV like Gotham, like, oh, we hate this character.
No.
You don't hate the person, you just hate that character, and you hope that they get their just due kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between disliking and really hating a character and mean-spirited.
Yes.
Like if you have a mean-spirited outlook about that person or that situation, it creates real sickness,
Yeah, it's true.
But anyway, on that positive note.
Wow, what an amazing podcast. Susan, thank you so much for being on our show. What is your website so people can reach you and talk to you and maybe get a future role in the
Oh,
movie of
absolutely.
yours.
Absolutely. I would really like to get a message that is not about selling me something, but actually wanting me to do work with you and for you. But that website is www.curiousdogcreative.com, curiousdogcreative.com. And there is a contact form on that you can
Awesome.
send information to. And I also have a Facebook page for Curious Dog Creative,
Nice.
which is a good way to reach out.
Now, don't sell her just, just
Yeah.
information.
Oh, we're all looking for, a way to make a decent living. So I understand
right.
whoever's asking me for, I can do this with your website. That's their job and that's what they're doing. So, but
Yeah.
the fewer of those I can receive, that much better.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you don't mind if
So
people
much.
ask you like for tips on.
Oh no,
that
no,
stuff.
because I have done coaching for performance and coaching for if people have business plans that they're really interested in developing. I'm not a life coach in the sense of trained to be that, but hopefully the past something number of years has given me enough good things that have happened and also disappointments that I can help a person navigate the waters.
I can see that.
So
See you doing that. Well, thank you, Susan, for being on the show. And we have some fun upcoming shows, so please stay tuned. Subscribe, follow, and like our podcast. Check out our show notes for our website, social media links to find us. Please check out Brian's interview to hear all about my co-host today. He is an amazing personal trainer, so check him out. So until next time, thank you.
thank you.